right, so good morning, good afternoon, folks. Welcome in across the continent. We truly have a gigantic audience coast to coast across Canada and the US today, so a big welcome to all of you. My name is Jesse. I know a lot of you are familiar with me, but if you are new to us at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Now, this is our first kickoff program in November. We've got over 40 to come. You can check out everything on our newsletter, and everything is coming up on our YouTube channel as well. So if you want to keep the learning going, explore any broadcast this month, 3,000 ones over the last 7 years, it's all right there. Now, I'm really thrilled today for our classes because you guys get to hang out with one of my all-time favorite people and groups that we ever bring on the show. And that is Anna from the Vermont Institute of Natural Sciences. So they rescue, rehabilitate, re-release injured birds. They have bird ambassadors to highlight the amazing world of raptors, birds of prey, for those who are new to the term. Every time they come on, we get the chance to meet some really special birds. And so I'm going to stop talking a minute, turn it over to Anna to blow your mind with some live birds of prey. Really excited for all your live questions. YouTubers, too, a big welcome to you across the continent. And so without further ado, Anna, welcome back to the program. Second time in a little under a month. This is very exciting, or over a month, either one.
Either one, as often as we can do these. These are great. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Jesse. And hi, everyone out there. My name is Anna. I'm the Director of On-Site and Outreach Programs at the Vermont Institute of Natural Science. We're also called VINS by our acronym. And our whole mission is to motivate people to care about the environment. It's in our history. And today we do so in three main ways: through education, research, and wildlife rehabilitation. Now, as an educator, I'm most concerned with education. So in this quick program today, we're going to get to meet three of our education ambassador birds. Now, another part of that mission, I mentioned the rehabilitation. We are a wildlife hospital, and we take in injured and orphaned wild birds and release them into the wild as soon as they're healthy and able to go. But unfortunately, it's not always possible. Some of the birds that come to us have very, very severe injuries, and they might not be able to survive in the wild after they're done healing. So we offer those birds what we call a career change, and they come to stay with us. We give them the best possible care that we know how, and in exchange, they help us with our education programs. So given the temperature outside here in Vermont, again, we're located up in central Vermont here in New England, it's actually getting up to be about 50 degrees today. So, pretty balmy, but it's cold. It is migration season for a lot of the animals that we have enjoyed throughout the summertime and the early part of the fall. They are heading elsewhere to spend the wintertime. So today we're going to meet three birds who all have a sort of different migration story. One is a complete migrant bird, a bird that travels long distances every year on its migration. Another is an incomplete migrant, a bird that kind of decides whether or not to stay or go every year. And the last bird that we'll meet is not a migrant. And I want you guys to be thinking about not only what is migration and how do birds accomplish this amazing journey, but what are the decisions that they make as to whether or not to migrate, and how is their lifestyle kind of focused around those decisions. So I'm going to go ahead and get our first bird out, and I'll be right back.
Fantastic. Thanks, Anna. While you're doing that, I do want to note, just for everyone's info, I put it in the YouTube chat and the StreamYard chat. Anna and I were chatting before the broadcast about an amazing coverage recently of their Kestrel Ferrisberg and some of its paintings. So I put the USA Today article in the chat. I'll make sure all our registered classes have that as well. Very, very cool. And vinsweb.org is their general site. But we are here with a bird, so I'm going to be quiet. Go for it.
Thank you so much for that, Jesse. Yes, so right here, this guy, his name is Northfield. We name our birds at VINS after where they were found in the wild. So if they were injured somewhere, found by a human being and brought to our wildlife hospital, we want to remember that they were wild animals and they grew up raised by their own hawk parents or owl parents or things like that. So Northfield here is from Northfield, Vermont, and he is a broad-winged hawk. Now, I like to say that the guy who went around naming all of our North American hawks in English, he wanted you to know what you were looking at. So you might imagine that this bird has broad wings, which he does. He has really wide, flat panels of a wing. In fact, his scientific name, Buteo platypterus, Buteo refers to the fact that he is a hawk, and platypterus means flat wing. So he's got wings and honestly a tail It's kind of shaped like a kite or a sail. He's got a pretty short tail, but he can fan it out wide. And those wide, flat wings are good for catching a lot of air up underneath them. So he is most effective in his flight at soaring or letting the wind push him along where he needs to go. Now, this is a really efficient way of flying. It means that a broadwing hawk like Northfield doesn't have to flap his wings constantly to get going anywhere. He can sort of just hang out in the air while the air currents push him where he needs to go. Now, this is very useful because broadwing hawks are our complete migrant. Now, this means, being a complete migrant, that every single member of his species, and they're native all up and down the east coast of the United States, they pick up and leave for the winter every year. There are no broadwing hawks to be found anywhere in the northeastern part of the United States after the end of September. Every single one of them goes to places like Central America and South America. And they accomplish this on those wide, flat wings. Most often, we see them using two different kinds of air currents to get going where they're going. They use thermals, or rising columns of hot air that come off the land during the day. As the sun heats different parts of the landscape differently, a grassland is different from a forest, different from a lake, different from an asphalt parking lot. These different kinds of air temperatures create these spiraling columns of hot air that, as we know, rise up into the sky. A broadwing hawk might get in at the bottom of one of these thermals and then follow it in a little circle around as it pushes him higher and higher into the sky. So if you've ever seen a group of vultures circling in that way and been afraid for your own mortality, don't worry about it. They are using that thermal. They are just climbing the little wind elevator to get them higher up into the sky until they reach the top of it, where that hot air starts to get far enough away from the ground that it's cooling off. And then they will glide over down to the next thermal. Circle up from the bottom of that one, glide over to the next one. It's a very efficient way of making their way south. But another type of air current that broadwing hawks also use is from a geographic feature. Here in the eastern United States, we have the Appalachian mountain range that runs from north to south. And our prevailing winds, our dominant weather patterns, come from the west to the east. So all of that wind has to go up and over the Appalachian Mountains at a certain point. And in the point where it's going up over the side of the mountains, that is where the broadwing hawks can catch these mountain updrafts, these pockets of wind that will also lift them up into the sky in a continuous north-south line. So this becomes a kind of broadwing hawk highway. They use these travel corridors by the thousands and thousands until they get to other places where they might need to follow a tricky bit of landscape, namely the Gulf of Mexico, right? If these birds are getting to South America, at some point they're going to need to go across that body of water, but most of them actually don't. Most broadwing hawks avoid crossing water entirely because wind is very unpredictable over water. He could get blown out to sea in a storm. He could get too tired and just have to stop and rest, but there's absolutely nowhere for him to do it. So almost all of the broadwing hawks go through the Isthmus of Panama, the tiny little land bridge between North and South America, where we have Nicaragua and Costa Rica and Guatemala and the southern tip of Mexico. All of these little tiny countries see the full population of broadwing hawks funnel their way out of North America into South America every year. And it can be close to 1.2 million of these hawks at once. Imagine being a scientist working down there in Panama and looking up at the sky and seeing hundreds of thousands of these little hawks all soaring along southward at one time. I have never seen that, but it's definitely something that I would love to see at some point. Now, unfortunately, Northfield here, this broadwing hawk, he did not get the opportunity to migrate. He has instead been in our care here at Vince since he was very young. He actually fell out of his nest tree when he was just a fluffy, downy little baby. He fell from a great height and broke his right shoulder. It's very hard to see because he holds himself very prim and proper, but his right wing doesn't sit nicely next to his body the same way that his left wing does. And he doesn't have full range of motion at all over that wing. So he really can only fly about 100 feet with a good gust of wind underneath him, or without that, maybe it's only 20 or 25 feet. It's nowhere near the 3,000 miles that he would need to cover to get where he's going in South America. Now, one funny thing I'll point out, just because he's doing it right now, he's seen something interesting on the other side of the room. I honestly don't know what it is that he's looking at, but he's so focused that if I move my hand underneath him, like I'm just a branch in the wind, he locks his head in space so he can stay concentrated on that thing that he's seen. He's pretty good at it. He's pretty focused right now. He's not going to let this wind battering his tree branch take his focus away from whatever interesting thing. And honestly, I have no idea what he's staring at over there. So Northfield here, he is 7 years old, and he has been an education ambassador, helping us talk about migratory broadwing hawks for his whole life. He's doing a great job. So I'm going to sneak him back into his travel crate so we can meet our next bird.
Amazing. Well, we'll say a big farewell to Northfield. I want to note, too, sometimes in our broadcast, some of our classes will know we like to do cahoots in the program. We've got a really special one that I set up with Anna last year. So I've got this as a game pin. After we're done the entire broadcast today, Q&A, everything else, I'm going to make sure all our teachers have this cahoot and the game pin. But if you want to play along and learn even more about the amazing work they do at VINS and some of their Raptor friends, you can check that out. It's a lot of fun. We've had over 2,000 people play it so far. So really encourage you to check that out. And I'm excited to see who we're going to meet next. It's always a different group of birds with Anna at VINS. If you go back through our YouTube channel too, there's, I think, 10 different species we've had the chance to feature over the years together, and some really spectacular animals. I hope you guys are enjoying as much as I am. I'm going to leave it to Anna. I think she's pretty much ready to come back in a sec, and can't wait to show you our bird number 2. Ooh.
She was basically napping in her crate just now, which is why it took me a second longer to get her out and about. So this right here, this is Bloomfield, again, from Bloomfield, Vermont, which is way up north near the Canadian border, actually. And she is, well, I told you that whoever went around naming our North American hawks wanted you to know what you were looking at. If I turn her around and show you the color of her tail, you might guess that she's an orange-tailed hawk, but you would be wrong. She is a red-tailed hawk. Now, if she looks a lot bigger than Northfield, the broadwing hawk, then that's no mistake. Broadwing hawks are the smallest member of the Buteo genus, and red-tailed hawks are the largest member on the East Coast. If you go to the Intermountain West, you go to Idaho or Wyoming or Montana, they have a beautiful hawk out there called the ferruginous hawk. Ferruginous from the ferrous or rusty iron color on their wings. But here in Vermont, this is the largest of our soaring hawk species that we could hope to see. So she's big, she's hefty, and she is well built for hunting mammals. That's what red-tailed hawks really specialize in. Using their keen eyesight, their strong grasping taloned feet, and their curved or hooked beak, these birds of prey are capable of hunting things like squirrels, chipmunks, mice, but also young rabbits, young groundhogs, and all of these kind of boxy, muscular, small to medium-sized mammals that we have in our landscape. Her grip strength in those talons is close to double what an adult male human's grip strength is. It's around 200 pounds per square inch. So it's no problem for her to hang on to a rabbit that's struggling to get out of her way. She's just capable of hunting these large animals. Now contrast that to Northfield, our little broadwing hawk guy. There's no way he's going after a rabbit. Even a red or even a gray squirrel would kind of be a challenge for him. Instead, broadwing hawks get by hunting a lot of the smaller animals that go wider than mammals too. A broadwing hawk might eat a garter snake or a frog or a bunch of really large grasshoppers or cicadas. But that really gets to the crux of the difference between these two birds and how they choose to spend their winters. A broadwing hawk isn't going to find a lot of snakes or grasshoppers or frogs to eat in Vermont in January. The landscape is absolutely covered in snow and there's nothing for them to find. So they have to go somewhere else in order to find food to sustain themselves throughout the winter. But a red-tailed hawk, like Bloomfield here, she is sure to find herself a rabbit or two, a squirrel that pops its nose out on a warm day, maybe some chipmunks or some mice that come out from under the snow to nibble at the seeds under your bird feeder, or cross between habitats by crossing a road. There are actually lots of things for a red-tailed hawk to eat here in the winter, although not as many as there are in the summertime. So for red-tailed hawks, we consider them to be an incomplete migrant. Some individuals within the population choose to migrate, and others don't. And that doesn't mean that one individual will migrate every single year and her neighbor will not. The individual chooses for themselves each year. Maybe Bloomfield decides, you know what? It's 2022. I've seen a lot of squirrels this summer. I think there are going to be plenty for me here. I'm not going to bother to migrate this winter. I'll stay put. But next year, maybe 2023, I didn't see very many chipmunks, very many mice, or very many rabbits around. I think I'm not going to survive the winter if I stay, so I'm going to migrate. So these birds are constantly evaluating the landscape. They're deciding whether or not it's good to stay here and continue to hunt in this one area, maybe move to the next field over, or maybe move to the next country over. They do this not only in the migration season, but we also know that they do this during the breeding season. I get asked a lot of the time, what is the average territory size that a pair of red-tailed hawks who are raising their young will defend? How big of a space do they need? And that answer depends heavily on the density of prey. How many chipmunks per square mile are in this area? If there are a lot, we can pack those territories pretty close together. If there aren't that many, then maybe those red-tailed hawks are going to defend a larger area because they need more space to supply themselves with more food. This is one of the reasons why we choose to focus in our education and our research on the raptors, on the birds of prey. It's because by studying them, we can learn a lot from them about how healthy the rest of the landscape is. Because a hawk, like our broadwing or like this red-tailed hawk, will only stay in an area and live and breed in an area if it has a healthy population of other animals. We can assume that an area that has a hawk has a healthy population of other animals. The word for this that biologists use is a sentinel species, a species that stands for the rest of the species in their ecosystem. So there's lots of good reasons to look at hawk populations, even though for red-tails and broadwings at the very least, their conservation status is really positive. They're doing very well in their range, much, much better than they were 40 or 50 years ago. And their population trend is either stable or increasing in many areas. So that's a really good sign for those places, but not a reason to ignore what's going on. Always a reason to keep our eyes on them as they are keeping their eyes on the landscape as well. Now, Bloomfield here, she's actually our oldest active education ambassador. She came into our rehab clinic after, unfortunately, striking a power line and breaking her left humerus. That upper arm bone near her shoulder has a nice jagged break in it, and after it healed, had a giant callus. So she, too, doesn't really have full range of motion in her wing. She can't move it the way that she needs in order to fly. She's very strong, but that strength is not enough to catch her when a strong gust of wind comes by. She goes flailing and crashing into the ground. So we decided she was not eligible for release. She became a member of our education team back in 1996. So that means that Bloomfield is 27 years old. And all of our birds' birthdays are January 1st, just for ease of record keeping. So she's going to be 28 soon, which is kind of nuts. So she's done a really great job showing off. I wish maybe I'll bring her a little closer to the camera so you can see her. Oh, nope. She says no. She was so comfy there. The feathers on the bottom of her chin were all fluffed out, but now I annoyed her, so we're gonna go.
Well, we'll say farewell to her, but that is an incredible age of bird. We always get the question, how old can the birds get? So I'm glad we sort of touched upon that already. I will note how, while Anna's getting our third ambassador ready, one of the things we like to highlight at the end of Vin's programs, because it's really special to get the chance to hang out with them. If any of our classes are keen, I will pass along the Vin's website in general, but they do have a really amazing adopt program at Vin's, and particularly around their kestrels, where you can monitor birds and check out with measuring bird boxes and more. So lots of great stuff on the go to help their conservation and monitoring efforts. And I'll make sure all our teachers have that at the end as well, if you guys are keen as a class to look into some of the great stuff they've got going. Now, I must admit, I'm a big hawk person, but I'm a much bigger owl person. And I'm really excited that Anna's third bird fits the bill as we come in with our third ambassador.
He's being real nibbly right now. He's like, I just want to eat your fingers. That's okay. So this is Heartland right here. Heartland from Heartland, Vermont. We got a bunch of Vermonter birds here today. And Heartland is, of course, a barred owl. And I really always overpronounce that, barred, with a D on the end, because you guys might be familiar with another species of owl called the barn owl. Both types of owl exist. Barn owls are the tall, ghostly white birds with a heart-shaped face that you find living in grasslands all around the world. Barred owls, like Heartland, though, are a forest-dwelling owl that are limited to the east coast of the United States and areas in the Pacific Northwest as well. So they're our own North American forest owl. And I'm sure you can tell just by looking at him what kind of bird he is. Owls all have that characteristic flat face with the gigantic eyeballs and the rounded off head. Barred owls are not one of the owls that have ear tufts or two little tufts of feathers on top of the head that help with camouflage, not with hearing. So instead, he's got that nice, beautifully rounded head and a very prominent facial disc. It looks almost like someone took an ice cream scoop to his face twice and just like plopped his eyeballs down in the middle like a cherry. What he's got going on is essentially a satellite dish that helps him to gather in sound waves from the world and funnel them back towards his ear holes. He's got ears on either side of his head, just behind and below the eye, just like humans do. They're covered over by feathers, though, which is why you can't immediately see them. But his actual hearing device, if you were to make the same analogy between his ears and human ears, we've got this part of our ear sits on the outside, this flap of skin and cartilage it's made to just gather in sound from the world. If you cup your hand behind your ear, things start to sound a little bit louder. You're making that part of your hearing device bigger, able to catch more sound waves. Heartland's two facial discs are that hearing apparatus for him, and they are bigger than his skull. If I were to poke Heartland in the side of the head, which I'm not going to do because that is very rude and he would be very annoyed with me, but my finger would disappear up to about the second knuckle before I hit the side of his head. Most of his head is feathers, and most of those feathers on his face are about detecting sound. Now, this is very important because barred owls are our example of an animal that does not migrate in the winter. They stay with us all winter long when there's 6 or 8 inches of snow on the ground all over our beautiful forests from approximately early December through almost mid-April sometimes. And it's in this time period when our owls, who are very much opportunistic in their prey, they like to eat kind of anything. Mice and chipmunks, frogs and salamanders, small birds, large insects, and everything in between. It's at this time that owls begin to rely almost exclusively on rodents. But those rodents are beneath the snow. They are tunneling and storing their food and foraging and going about their little mouse day in tunnels in what we'd call the subnivean zone beneath the snow. And owls don't have X-ray vision. They don't have heat sensing vision either. They're not like snakes. They see about as well as you and I do in the daytime, and they see even better than we do in the nighttime, but they can't see the mice under the snow. So what are they going to do? Well, they could migrate, right? They could go to Costa Rica with the broadwing hawk. There's plenty of food for them there, but they don't do that. They stay. And what they do is they use their sense of hearing to locate their food. A barred owl can hear a mouse under about 6 inches of snow, and they can accurately pinpoint the location of that mouse sound source. Now, they can do this not only because they have such sensitive ears for hearing quiet sounds, but also members of the Strix genus, this barred owl, the great gray owl as well, the tawny owl over in Europe, they have offset ears. They have one ear that is higher up on their skull than the other one. This allows them to triangulate sound sources. They can basically get an extra dimension of information out of where they heard that sound coming from. If I hear a sound from off to my right, I know it came from off to my right because the sound waves reach my right ear before they reach my left ear, like nanoseconds before, but my brain can do that. Sounds that are above and below me or in front of and behind me are a little bit trickier because they might come at both ears at the same time. But if I had one higher ear and lower ear, now I can tell not only did that come from my right, but it was up there, or my left and it was down there. And this is super important for the owl to be accurate in their hunting dives. This is a behavior called snow plunging, which I think very accurately describes exactly what it looks like. But you can find videos everywhere of barred owls and great gray owls like them plunging feet first into the snow, unbroken, pure white surface of snow, and coming up with a mouse or a vole that all they did was hear. They never saw it until the moment that they caught it. Now, we see a lot of barred owls into our rehab clinic here at the Vermont Institute of Natural Science. In some years, we see as many as 70 of them come to the hospital in just the space of 3 months over the winter. Other years, not so many of them. And we got really curious as to why this might be. What are the patterns that govern how many barred owls show up needing medical care versus being healthy in themselves out in the wild? So we did a little bit of research in partnership with a volunteer statistician and a local ski mountain, because Vermont, with their weather data. And what we learned was that in years that are warmer and wetter, they kind of hover around freezing here rather than just plunging down into the single digits and staying there. Or we get a lot of precipitation, a lot of snow, even some rain. Those are years when we see a lot of barred owls in the clinic. And we got to thinking, well, why might that be? Well, their strategy for surviving in the winter is to plunge through snow. And in those warm, wet years, we tend to have a thick layer of ice on top of our fluffy white snow. So the barred owls that would normally be plunging into the snow are smacking into some ice. Now, that didn't discourage them. A barred owl still needs to eat, and they're very ingenious as to how they go about finding their food. And a lot of barred owls started coming in towards roads, out of the forest, and hunting alongside the side of a road where cars were going by all the time, but the road was plowed. And so the mice and the squirrels would be visible as they were crossing. We saw a lot of barred owls getting hit by cars in those years, and were able to trace it back to being linked to those weather patterns that unfortunately are the result of climate change here in Vermont. So this is a species of bird that we can see is already being affected by climate change in its particular habits and particular way here in our neck of the woods. So even more motivation for us to work together as a community, as a country, as a planet to find solutions for climate change to reduce our impact on the environment for the sake of these lovely, lovely owls. Now, Heartland came here about the same time Northfield did, actually. He has no physical injury, but he was raised by humans. We don't really know much about the circumstances of that. We think he was kept maybe for a week by the family that found him. And in that time, he was an impressionable little baby owl. He learned more about how to be a human than he did about how to be an owl. And this has stayed with him throughout his life. So he's incredibly comfortable around people in a way that is dangerous for him and honestly for an untrained human being. And we don't feel safe releasing him into the wild. He would probably find the nearest person to perch on, and that wouldn't be great for either him or them. So I'm going to sneak him back into his enclosure. He's done such a good job.
Such a good job. Way to go. Thank you, Heartland, Northfield, Bloomfield. Again, it's really awesome to get the opportunity to meet 3 different animals, sort of highlight their differences, similarities, and more. We're going to go live with questions in a minute. Sherwood Public School, your devices are off, but I will come to you, Ms. Poff's class. Ms. Carton, Mr. Boccia's class, welcome in. And then YouTube friends, especially our class, Ms. Fuller at Uplift of Michigan Academy. We'd love to hear from you in the chat. The more questions you have, the merrier. Let's dive in a minute. Sherwood Public School, you just shared this in the chat, but I'd love to come live if you're willing. So if you want to unmute your mic, come on in, 7/8, and kick us off. Hi, guys. Hey! Wow. You guys are like more energetic than I am. That doesn't happen very often.
No.
Unmute. Come chat with me. I want to take your question live if we can.
This one. Can you hear us?
There we are.
There we go. Say hi, Barry's Bay.
Hey, guys.
Right on. Do you want to come up, Edward, and ask your question?
Run, Edward. I'm so sorry.
All right. Come on, Edward.
Hey, Edward.
Everyone else,
Hello.
please.
We can't see you.
How do birds know where and when to migrate?
Fantastic question.
Ooh,
Nice
good question. How do they know where and when to migrate? That's a great question because they don't always do it correctly. When to migrate is generally governed by the hormones that they have in their body. So as genetics are telling them, ooh, yeah, okay, when there's only this amount of daylight happening every day, when the shadows are in this way, when the leaves are falling off the trees, this is the time that I really need to get restless and get going. It's a phenomenon that the Germans call Zugenruhe, which is migratory restlessness. They just start getting really kind of antsy, like you maybe towards the end of a school day, you're just like, I gotta go. They have that feeling due to changes in the environment around them. As for where to migrate, there's a lot of evidence that they need to learn that from their parents or their peers from other birds. The broadwing hawk example is a great one because I mentioned that they somehow have to figure out that they have to go through the Isthmus of Panama rather than across the Gulf of Mexico. And they figure that out by watching older generations of broadwing hawks. Like they'll go south with their parents for the first year and be like, oh, okay, this is the route I should take. But some broadwing hawks don't get that opportunity. And they fall back on some like dead reckoning, you might say, where they're like, okay, I'll follow the coastline, right? I know the Atlantic Ocean's got to stay on my left. I'm going south. And then they get to Florida and they realize their mistake because you can't go anymore. So there are always a group of young broadwing hawks that get stuck in Florida every year.
I love that as a kickoff question. I want to note this is a really common topic in our broadcast. If kids are keen, Life of Birds, which is a BBC book and documentary series, is amazing. An Immense World by Ed Yong also talks about migratory behavior in a really cool scientific way. And we often do programs at the Lucky Peak Research Station. You can check these out on our YouTube channel where they're literally catching migratory birds like in nets, talking all about this. So a great follow-up for Edward and anyone else who's keen. Miss Carton's class, Anchorage, I'm going to head to you. Your mic wasn't working earlier, but I'm hoping it will. And worst case, you can share in the chat. We'll pass along questions. Let's see, grade sixes. Hey, guys. Maybe, kind of, sort of. Hi. So mic's still off, but that's okay. So share in the chat, and I'll bring you in, and I'll share your question. I'll have you on screen when I read off your question, okay? So play around with that. And I'm going to head to Mr. Boccia's class joining us in Toronto. Come on in, guys. Nice to see you again, and welcome back. 4 or 5. Hello. Do we have any questions for Anna?
We do. Matilda, where am I? Guys, move out of the way, please. So Matilda can make your way.
Everybody. So you mentioned that some of the birds you think they can't go out into the wild, but I was wondering, how do those birds get exercise?
Ooh, great question.
That is a great question. How do those birds get exercise? Well, the ones that we have that can fly, we offer them that opportunity as much as we can. So they're aviaries where they live. They have different perches at different heights in their enclosures that they are free to fly back and forth on their own time if they want to. Most birds are kind of lazy though. So given that opportunity, given the biggest enclosure in the world, they would just sit in one spot. So to make sure they get enough exercise, we ask them to fly. We have trained several of our flighted birds that if they go to the raised gloved hand of a trainer, that they will get a piece of food when they do that. And then we just go back and forth in all different kinds of settings in our education programs right here at the Nature Center. So if you get the chance to visit us, you could see some of our birds in action. For our birds that can't fly at all, like Northfield, for example, he's really not great at it. We try to exercise his mind a little bit as well. So he is one of our birds that we've trained for a behavior where he can identify a colored block amidst a bunch of different colors. So he's very, very good at that all the time.
We've done that in one of our broadcasts. Just one ever, I think, that we did the live blocks.
So.
That was really cool. Yeah. Ms. Carton, thanks for all these great questions. And our Uplift of Michigan Academy, I'm coming to you next on YouTube. But Ms. Carton's grade sixes, and I'll have you on just to say hi as I share this. First question they wanted to ask is, how do the hawks know when to land? Presumably, like in their migration, or like where they know how to finish? I think so.
Yeah, how do they know where to land? Basically, like how do they know when to stop when they've arrived where they're supposed to go? I don't really know the answer to that question. I imagine it has a lot to do with being able to identify what looks like an appropriate habitat from the air. Something that says to them, oh, you know what, that really looks like it probably has a lot of mice. I'm going to stop here. And they might stop there, and then get chased out by the bird that's already resident. And so they have to go a little bit farther south. This can happen with another style of migration that peregrine falcons do called leapfrog migration, where the northernmost birds migrate to the southernmost point. So they go up and over the whole other rest of the peregrine population, I think, in order to avoid that competition.
Interesting. Very, very cool question. All right, Miss Fuller's class, they've got a great couple questions on YouTube. The first one, very simply, I'm just going to take it really quick. How many birds do you have right now?
Oh, in care resident, so permanent resident birds, we have, I believe, 68.
Wow.
I think so.
That's a lot of
68.
birds.
I work with our education ambassadors, of which there are 18. But we have
Wow.
another whole team of birds that they're kind of hands off. They just get to do what they want to do all day.
A lot of birds, though. Very cool. Thanks, Miss Fuller. Since that was a really quick one, I'm going to take one more from you guys. One of the students wants to know, how do these birds sleep, and how do they sleep?
Ooh,
What's going on?
interesting. So cutely, they do sleep. Absolutely, they sleep like we do. I would say they don't sleep like they're unconscious and dead to the world for 8 hours a day. They sleep a little more fitfully than that. So I say, it's not strange to see an owl in the daytime, because if you're walking under an owl's tree in the daytime, they woke up 5 minutes ago when they heard you coming, and they've been watching you ever since. And it's an advantage to do that, right? They don't want to sleep through a potential predator attacking them. So they sleep a little bit more fitfully, but it works for them. They sleep sometimes on one foot, right? So they'll like rest 1 foot at a time, but they don't really lie down on their chest or anything like that.
Yeah. Humans are actually one of the more like dead to the world sleepers in the world. And it sort of has to do with our evolutionary history, because you have a little bit of protection in a group around you. Like you're not all, if you really think about sleeping where you're out for like 8 hours and how that affects predators wanting to eat you and being able to very easily, it's actually a really weird thing that a lot of animals sleep the way that they do. So I like when we get the sleep question. Thanks, Miss Fuller's class. All right, Sherwood, I'm coming back to you. 7/8, unmute your mic and you're good to go. We're going to do another round, everybody. Hey, guys.
Who's got another question? Come on up. Jensen, let's come on up. Do you want to read the one off the board?
Yeah, that's the one I put.
All right, and we've got, so come on up. I want to see you on the camera.
I don't want to, though.
All right, we're going to hear a voice. We're not going to see a face.
Okay.
Say it loud, Jensen. Loud.
Why and how can some birds twist their head 2/3 of the way around?
Mhm.
Awesome. The head question. I love it.
We get that one a lot. So why and how? There's like the ultimate reason and the proximate reason, right? The proximate reason is why they turn their heads all the way around is because they need to look that way, right? The ultimate reason is because they have a bunch more bones in their neck than we do. We have 7 cervical vertebrae. You can feel them sort of on the back of your neck, your 7 neck bones. And if you think of them like blocks stacking on top of one another, 7 blocks on top of one another, it's kind of wiggly. You can move it. There's a lot of joints there. But birds have anywhere between 10 and 25 of these bones, and owls have 14. So that's twice as high of a block stack. You have twice as many joints that can turn. Now, owls, because they can turn their heads beyond 180 in both directions, they have a couple of extra features in their neck. They have moved their blood vessels, your jugular vein, your carotid artery, right there under your skin surface. Terrible idea, but it's from back when we had gills. They've moved those veins closer to their spine so that nothing kind of pinches off when they're twisting their head.
Interesting. Very cool. I'm so glad we got that question. We've never had that context before. Remind me when we're done. I've got to share something about the jugular.
Yeah.
Miss Tartan's class, again, I know the mic's off, but I'll bring you in to say hi. They got 2 other great questions. So what's the worst thing you've seen happen to a hawk or bird that's come to you? Is there any injuries that you've had that are real challenges to deal with the ambassadors there?
Yeah, I think we got this question last time, and I was like, "Oh gosh, I don't want to remember these things." But I'll talk about one. We had very recently, and this is not a raptor, but we had a loon come in that had a hook stuck in its throat, and it was a massive fishing sinker and hook kind of a complex that was just right down there. in its esophagus. Like it had swallowed this thinking it was a fish, and just like a fishing hook, it was way stuck. And so there's like no way that you can just pull that out. You would absolutely make the injury much, much worse. So our team, as well as some loon researchers from New Hampshire that came over, worked on this bird for hours, and they got it out, and the bird was releasable, and it was awesome.
Oh, that's such a great story. I love that. And I mean, again, this is something that we get with a lot of the animal hospitals, amazing organizations like VINS that we partner with, is that there's this real international and sort of interstate, interprovincial effort to work on animals like that. And I think that's one of the most heartening things ever. I think, we've all heard a lot of bad news in the world, and the thought that like, oh, we found an animal in real distress and people want to come from all over to help that bird and allow it to get back to the wild is a really fantastic thing. And I think a great part of every time we have you on, Anna. So thank you for that. Mr. Bocci's class, I'm going to head to you guys. Come on in and take us away, Toronto. Hi.
When did you start your job?
Oh, me? I started working here actually the same summer that Northfield came in. So I started working at VINS in 2016, which is more than 7 years ago now.
That's so exciting. Well, a great follow-up for this. Miss Fuller's class on YouTube wanted to know if you have a favorite bird, and there's no pressure at all. But I mean, it's a big one.
I mean, there's no pressure, but Northfield's sitting right there looking at me. So, what we like to say, and it's true, is that whatever bird I'm working with at the moment, I have a couple of birds who have been particular like challenges over the years, like good challenges, like training challenges. We've made strides. We've won things together, not like prizes, just like we made it through today together. And among them are Northfield, the Broadwing hawk, as well as Paige, our female Harris hawk.
Very, very cool. And how nice that the Northfield story has been so consistent with you throughout your career. I know we featured Northfield a lot in these broadcasts, and that's really special. So classes, I know we can talk all day about birds. Unfortunately, I know some of you need to go. So what I'm going to do is highlight again. If you want to learn more, vinsweb.org. They're on social media all over the place. Lots of opportunity to keep the learning going. I'll make sure you all have that amazing article about our artist bird, Kestrel, at VINS right now. And I want to make sure all our classes have the Adopt a Bird website. You can check out more about the amazing stuff you can do to help their incredible conservation efforts. Anna, we're going to bring in all three classes live to say a big thank you and farewell in a minute. Is there any last message you want to share with our kids before we bring them in?
I don't think so. I think I got to cover a lot of things. I'm just excited to be able to reach all of you guys. And I hope you learned something interesting today that you'll take home with you, that you'll share with someone else. And in that way, you'll be helping us with our mission, and you'll be helping these birds.
Bravo. Can't think of a better message than that. VINS does really incredible work. One of my very favorite partners we have on. As I said, we're going to bring you all in to say thank you and farewell. Our YouTube classes, feel free to yell out as well. But Mr. Bocci's class, Miss Carton's class, Sherwood Public School, thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye for now. We'll see you all soon. Thank you so much, classes.